Again, another one of our favorite or science types. My favorite or science types. Jed, before joining our graduate program, took some time off and went and taught in a strange place called South America. And what was kind of cool about that is what those kinds of experiences can bring back to a grad program and how that sort of informs and shapes who you are and how you become a teacher. So Jed's talk, focusing on high school age students, a little bit different, how to make homework work, which is a very fascinating topic, and I've really enjoyed listening to Jed talk about this very topic for many months now. So without any more, Jed, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mike. I have a handout I'll pass around, a little bit more descriptions on what specific assignments I gave and an actual assignment example, sort of help you sort of understand exactly what I'm talking about with some of these assignments. So I'll just pass them around. So let's start off with, raise your hand if you enjoy homework at any point during your academic career. Wow, that's actually a little bit more than I thought. But so believe it or not, I actually really enjoyed homework. I really want to know if that's a surprise to you. Not the response I was looking for. But anyway, so I really enjoyed homework. I saw the value in it. I really liked the challenge of it, and that I understood the value and importance of it. And so when I got to my placement, I asked my teacher, so how do you do homework? What do you really, how does this work here? And she's like, I don't really do it. It's just too much of a hassle between kids getting zeros, kids not doing it, me wanting them to do something. And it's just really inconsistent. So that sort of really drove me for the reason for having the study is that I find homework to be important. How can I make it important so that my students see the importance as well? So my research objectives were, what type of homework is most associated with increased student engagement? And then does this increased student engagement lead to higher completion rates? So much like my students ask me, why homework? There has been research to show that there is increased grade scores, standardized test scores with homework. Though there are certainly a bunch of qualifiers, conditions, caveats to make that statement, but there is research saying that homework does have some tangible benefit when it comes to grades and scores. 72% of American teenagers are assigned homework on any given school day. 3/4 of Americans are experiencing homework, and yet 50% of the assignments that they get aren't really considered even to be educationally beneficial. That means that according to the criteria that it's reasonable, relevant, and reinforcing, half the assignments don't even meet that criteria. So obviously something is not lining up. Why is there a disconnect between students being assigned homework and there not being really any educational benefit that they see? And so how can we design homework so that it does have that educational benefit as intended? So the kinds of homework they're getting, 92% practice, 41% preparation, and 29% integration. And so if you want to think about this in terms of higher order to lower order thinking, really an emphasis on the lower order thinking preparation type of, practice types of questions, practice problems, vocab lists, what have you, and the integration, the higher order thinking, you don't see that as much. And so perhaps there's something in that it's just not academically challenging enough for them. And so getting at the main overall framework as to what I think homework should be designed under, what should be considered, is this idea of self-determination, and that students or people in general have three basic needs. They have a need for autonomy, meaning that they have an internal locus of control, they get to control their own destiny, if you will. Relatedness, that they feel like they're in a group, that they have a sense of belonging, and then competence, that they're able to do something. And then, so fulfilling these needs is a really major factor for cultivating intrinsic motivation, because that's really what drives intrinsic motivation, is that they are meeting one of these three needs, at least one of these three needs. And so talking to students, it's obvious that they are really in the extrinsic motivation mindset. They really focus on the grades. They don't really see assignments essentially for the value of learning as much as it does with how does this impact my grade? Will this question be on the test? That kind of thing. So how can we get students to sort of think about homework in terms of this rather than it just being a grade? And so that was kind of how, looking at my research, that this is kind of what led me to think about how homework should be thought as now. And so what did my study look like? So I was at a Southern Colorado high school. I had 3 chemistry classes, about 70 students in 1 geology class. There are certainly some differences in the types of students in those classes that I can get to during questions if that's something that interests you. And so I assigned 5 different assignments between the 2 classes. They were really different assignments, types of classes, and so I chose to do different assignments differently. And so if you want information on the assignments, they're on the handout that I provided. I started doing pre-surveys in January just to get a surface level of information. How engaging is homework? Do you find it difficult? How much time do you spend? Gave a few assignments out, then I had focus groups. I had offered the invitation to everyone, but only chemistry students accepted. Despite free pizza, I don't understand why geology students didn't participate, but it is what it is. And then post-surveys to end it, where that was, it wasn't like a pre-post survey. I wasn't looking at the change exactly. I was looking more at how did they find these assignments compared to other assignments they have had in classes, or comparing assignments to other assignments they have had in that class, okay? So, pre-survey results. What did my students believe to be the point of homework? You can see here that my chemistry students do see the benefit. They said that almost half the class said that there was additional practice to be at home. It helps you develop student study skills. And then there is a quarter of students who think that it's only an opportunity for a grade. And I would say that number is probably a lot higher from my focus group questions, because I asked them what the point of homework is, and they basically just looked at me and just said hatred, or there's no point, or they really were very frank with their discussion on homework. And so I think that number is definitely a little bit higher than what that shows. In geology, you see that number increase even more. Again, I think that can be attributed to the types of students in that class. But you do see some people say that there is additional practice to be at home and that it helps you develop independent study skills. So there's certainly some students that are recognizing the benefit of homework, but in large part, again, I think they're primarily motivated by grades. Fortunately for me, I only had 2 students out of the 7 who said there was no point. And so maybe they're a lost cause, maybe I got through to them, but so I guess that's assuring. So did they find my students find homework engaging? The answer to that is unequivocally no. So not a single student found any assignment to ever be highly engaging at all. Okay, which is about what I expected. 9 out of the 10 students found homework to be slightly engaging, or less engaging than that. I mean, 50% of the students found homework to be not engaging at all. I mean, they're basically watching paint dry. That's how engaging homework is for them. They might even prefer to watch paint dry, because then they don't even have to think about it. So what assignment did they find more engaging? And so this is getting at the post-survey results I was looking at. I asked my chemistry students to compare those 2 assignments that they had, because they were really different from one another. One was more traditional kind of homework packet spread out over the course of a few weeks that had questions that were really specific to the concept at hand, practice problems. And then another was to watch a video on YouTube. And so, wow, they really liked watching the YouTube video more than the homework packet. Surprising. And so 70% of the students found the YouTube assignment much more engaging. There's a little bit of a interesting thing in that they didn't find it to be as educationally beneficial compared to the homework packet, which there's certainly some reasons for that as well. But for the most part, the YouTube assignment much more engaging for the students than doing practice problems. For my geology students, I asked them to compare the assignments that they had in that class, because they were all a little bit non-conventional, a little bit different than what they might have gotten in other classes. And that we see here that 80% of students found those assignments to be at least as engaging, if not more, than assignments in other classes. And so of course I'm limited by having only 10 students respond on the Friday before spring break, but that was my decision. And so 20% said that they weren't. And so, but again, they do see that these assignments that were really geared and specifically designed with this kind of purpose in mind, was that they found them more engaging. So what about completion rate? How did that change? So geology, nothing changed, unfortunately. And that was my geology class was really kind of what spurred me for this research, is that they just didn't turn in homework. And I was really confounded by this. I thought that I was being super reasonable, and apparently I wasn't. And so there's no change in students turning in on time, and I think that would have stayed the same in every single class. That's the kind of student that we had. In chemistry, we did actually see a really big change in the amount of students turning in assignments, whether it had to do with the amount of time given to them, or whether they're more engaged with the assignment. I can't really parse out, but we saw over a 200% increase in students turning in assignments within 2 days of the due date. I had plenty of sort of specific anecdotes of students who just did not do homework or really didn't turn it in on time, and yet they turned in this YouTube assignment within a day that I was due and asked me several times throughout the rest of my time as student teaching whether they can do it again for extra credit or just do it again because they enjoyed it so much. They really liked the ability to choose and be on YouTube and do that kind of assignment. And so why does this work? And so getting back at those three needs is that I know my research objective was to look at the type of homework. I found that that was kind of inconclusive. I didn't have enough data to support one type over another. And so instead I looked at what common thread do all of these assignments have. And I found that self-determination theory could really explain it. And that relatedness, I didn't really have any assignments that pertain to relatedness looking back on it. Autonomy, a lot of my assignments were geared toward autonomy. They were open-ended. They let students choose their own learning. They felt like they had control over what their responses were. It wasn't necessarily content related. It wasn't a right or wrong answer. And so they really liked having that freedom and being able to do something with the content in a somewhat novel way. And then competence, homework packet, I really think speaks to that. They were doing the same types of problems that they would have had on their quiz or test they had in class. And so really their performance on the homework packet was indicative of how they would do in class. And so they could see that correlation there. And so homework is only useful if students do it. You can create an assignment that causes students to have a 100% retention rate of the material, but if you have 2 students who do it, it's essentially useless. And so I think that the way that teachers need to think about homework, especially for secondary teachers, primary teachers is a whole nother ballgame, but secondary teachers, I think they need to focus more on how to get students to do material in the first place, and then integrate the content into that second. And so I think that if you frame homework with the idea of like, are students feeling competent when they do it? Are students feeling autonomous when they're doing it? Do students feel like they're belonging in a group when they're doing these assignments? That you're going to get a much greater engagement and participation with that assignment. And so I think that's how homework should be framed, as opposed to how can I get students to learn this content, but rather how can I get the content integrated to how they're meeting these needs on the most basic level. And so I think that is my slides. Yes, Kath.
So can you describe your students, because it seems like you had 2 high achieving classes and maybe 1 class that was more of a
Yeah, exactly. So
rocks for jocks type class, sounded like?
Rocks are more than just for jocks, but
Good answer.
So
It sounded like you had, you know, your AP Chem and then your
so my geology class, my geology class, geology at this school was sort of seen as sort of like a makeup elective, as in they've maybe failed a science class in the past and they needed a science credits in order to graduate. So I had a lot of 11th and 12th graders. And not to say that I didn't have high achieving students, because I had some really high achieving students in that class who really did really well in that class. But I also had a lot of students who really were only there because they had not succeeded in other science classes. So they were a little bit less academically inclined for taking that course. They really weren't there to learn geology per se. It was more, I need this credit so that I can graduate. Whereas the chemistry class, it's college prep chemistry. It was designed to sort of have these students that had sort of these longer term academic goals in mind, and sort of like maybe I'm taking other APs at the time, but science isn't their thing, and so they're taking a college prep chemistry class. And so you get sort of this you get a lot more diversity in the geology class in terms of motivations for students taking that class, whereas in chemistry, it's a little bit more, I'm taking this class because I have longer term academic goals, or that I've done well in science classes in the past, but I'm not ready to take an honors chemistry class. And so I think that really kind of gets at why there are the differences between the geology and chemistry students.
And did you design different homework assignments for the classes based on basically the population? So like your AP chemistry, you gave them more rigorous assignments versus the geology, you tried to like.
So so for the types of assignments, so for chemistry, like the homework packet, for example, like that's kind of practice problems where they were able to sort of, it's math, and so the idea of practicing is really important there. The YouTube packet and all the other types of assignments were really kind of just only tangentially related to the content. And so that meant that students didn't necessarily have to really know the content and able to do it. They were able to, or they weren't able to get ahead necessarily because of how inconsistent students doing homework were. And so I try to make assignments so that if they did it, it would help them, but if they didn't, it wouldn't really hinder their success in the class. And so, for example, like the geologic timeline mnemonic, you don't need to memorize the geologic periods. Is it helpful? Yes. You can talk intelligently about it, so I try to come up with a way to get them to engage with that so that could help them, but it wouldn't necessarily determine their success in the class. Whereas with the particular unit, the homework packet, that was really integral to students' understanding of the material was them able to be doing practice problems. And so that was more of an opportunity for the students to really hone their skills and practice. And I didn't have that kind of material or assignments with geology. Anya?
Did you see any like gender differences in the responses given what we know about secondary science and gender differences?
Yeah, so the girls in the geology class were actually way more on top of it than the boys in geology. And so that was really great. I didn't really necessarily look at gender differences because I wasn't asking exactly what type of student responds best to what type of homework. I think that's certainly a great avenue for further research and looking at like what types of students respond best to different types of assignments and really being more intentional about the types of assignments and the type of data that I'm collecting when it comes to gender, ethnic groups, previous academic success. And so I definitely think that's an avenue for further research, but I can't really speak to that. Mike?
What's kind of refreshing is this is actually research about you and not necessarily your students. And so if you were to repeat this study about yourself doing homework, what would you change? What would be the biggest change in your method?
So the biggest change in my method is that I would probably, I would be much more intentional about like the specific types of homework that I was trying to target, like and really sort of get at, is this an integration assignment, or what really makes this an integration assignment, or what really makes this a practice assignment, or can it be classified as something else, and being really more intentional about what kind of data I was trying to collect, or what type of skills I was trying to collect, because some of these assignments, not to say that I wasn't thinking about this at all, but they're somewhat improvisational. I noticed that students weren't doing something, and so right in that day I try to come up with something to get them involved with it. And so I would definitely think a little bit more sort of upfront kind of intentionality about the homework assignments that I was giving would have given me a little bit more conclusive answers to the type of homework, because I found that I just didn't have enough data to state one way or another. Thank you.